Okay, the Military Commissions Act of 2006 removes the right of habeas corpus. Now, the habeas corpus is very important because it gives you the right to a trial by jury, gives you the right to make bail pending trial, so you can be with your family, because you're just accused of a crime. You haven't been convicted yet. In our system of government, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Now, unless you've committed something that is violent and heinous where you would be a danger to the public, you're supposed to be able to go home on bail until you're pending trial. That's the way our system was created. That's not what's going on in America today. They'll deny habeas corpus just like that. It's illegal for them to do it. It's unlawful for them to do that. It's a violation of your rights to do that. But you don't have rights anymore because you signed them all away. We'll talk about that. The Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Act of 2007, H.R. 1955. That's introduced by Jane Harman from California, Democrat. Surprise, surprise. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't really matter. The Democratic Party and Republican Party was only created for your entertainment. That's all it's for. It doesn't matter which one it is. The agenda never changes at the top. The agenda is the same. That's just to entertain you. Oh, we're going to do a bunch of Democrats over here. Look what they're doing to y'all. Well, what did the Republicans do? Stop and look back. Did they do any different? Not a thing in the world different. It's all the agenda. It doesn't change. This amends the Patriot Act to include civilian population of the United States. That means that the United States, people in the United States, civilian population now can be tortured, thrown in jail without right to habeas corpus and trial by jury and all this kind of stuff. You can just be thrown in a hole and forgotten about. All they have to do is declare you an enemy combatant by one single unfounded accusation. No proof whatsoever. And a lot of times they probably get paid pretty good to make that accusation. What's wrong with that? Now, didn't we learn in school that that's the kind of stuff that they did in the Soviet Union? How many of you read Pravda, the Soviet paper, newspaper in the English version? Y'all go read that. You might find out that you've been lied to just a little bit. You ought to go read that. That's good reading. It really is. You'd be amazed what they say about America. You know, I thought Soviet Unions were godless people. Man, didn't even believe in God. God is dead and all this kind of stuff. Go read Pravda. You might be surprised to read that they're saying that America has walked away from God. They talk about God and about Christ and about all these kind of things in their main newspaper. But I thought they were a nation that didn't believe in God. That's what we were told on the news, right? Wasn't that what we were told in school? Come to find out, it might not be exactly that way. Their leaders write about articles about God and Christ all the time. And I couldn't believe that. I said, this is not the Russia that we were told about. So we might have been manipulated all along. And we might need to open our horizons and understand that. It makes thought crimes against the politically correct idea of the day a crime and makes thought crimes a terrorist act. Sounds like George Orwell 1984 to me. And they just came up with a thing about, it's been about 3 weeks ago now. They can actually, the court can order you to have this scanner thing set on your head while you testify, and they can tell if you're lying or not. They can read your thoughts. Actually, they're going to do that in courts. It's a new lie detector kind of deal, and while you're under oath, they can determine if you're lying or not. And they're debating on right now whether to make us do that. Sounds awful like Orwell knew what he was talking about, doesn't it? The Real ID Act, U.S. citizens will be required to have a national ID card to travel, enter a federal building, and apply for any public benefit or program. That will come out probably at the end of this year. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act allows secret warrants from a secret court to invade your privacy. FISA teamed up with AT&T and Verizon communication companies to spy on U.S. citizens. Phone calls and emails of Americans are being tracked according to documents brought forward by Mark Klein of AT&T. Privacy was redefined by the Bush administration. Basically, you don't have any. And Bush administration was spying on the citizens, U.S. citizens, 7 months before September 11th. But I thought that that was the reason he had to spy on us, is because of September 11th. Because of the 9/11 incident. Isn't that what he said on TV? Do you mean that George Bush wasn't telling the truth? That good, honorable Christian president? Now, that really disturbs me. I would have never thought. When they told me he was a Christian man, I contemplated that for about 2 seconds. I said, nah. And so the people in my church got all over me. You don't believe nobody up there. I said, you're about right. I don't believe anybody in Washington is much of a Christian. Can't be. You wouldn't stay there if they were. So they fussed at me a little bit in my church. And then he had this little interview, and I don't remember what state. It was It was one of these popular shows he was on. And he admitted to be a member of the Skull and Bones. Well, I didn't know what Skull and Bones was. I said, well, it didn't sound right. Something that a Christian would want to be part of. But so I went and started reading about Skull and Bones. And I found out it wasn't really exactly a Christian organization. It was more occult more than anything, like satanic. And what does the Scripture tell us? You can't serve two masters, folks. You're going to serve one, hate the other one. That's what it says. So how can he be part of an occult, satanic organization and be a Christian at the same time? You think you were sold a bill of goods? I know you were. His acts in office proved to me he was nothing but a dirtbag. His friends call him George, dumb as a box of rocks Bush. That's what they called him. Right here in Texas. Passed through, went down the George and Laura Bush Highway yesterday. That was something. And also the Ronald Reagan Memorial Highway. I don't know about that. They got a big sign. This is the home. What's the name of his hometown? I forget. It's down here on I-10, but you go through, on 20. Crawford, it's on I-10, whatever it is, and they got, this is the home of George and Laura Bush. And it's right, a big sign on the interstate. I said, if I lived in that town, I'd put one on the other side, one of them big billboards saying, I want to apologize that we allowed him to live in this town. I would have to do that. I'd be ashamed of it. Oh, he moved to Dallas? Okay, well, he's one of y'all's neighbors now. So. You what? Yeah. I'd love to see him. I'd love for him to be here. He's probably got some of his guys here anyway. Like I said, y'all need to get you a real job. National Security Administration was created by President Truman in 1952, analyzes millions of phone conversations each day, compiles a database of millions of U.S. citizens' phone conversations, and there's an estimated 38,000 employees and $43.5 billion per year in their budget. Works with the CIA, Agency, National Reconnaissance Office, and Federal Bureau of Investigation and FISA to invade the privacy of the U.S. citizens. Why do they want to spend that kind of money and effort to listen to everything we have to say? Well, it's because they're afraid of us. They got to keep up with what our attitudes are so they can circumvent us, what we're doing. And that's the bottom line. It was on the news last night. They were listening to your emails and stuff. That's how they found out that we're right-wing terrorists that believe in such evil things as the Constitution. Boy, isn't that terrible? We believe in the Constitution, for God's sake. Don't believe in that terroristic document. And they're sitting here at the heads of the greatest nation on earth that was created by people that wrote that terroristic document. But don't support it. You can't do that. Might be considered a terrorist. Presidential executive orders. Now these orders, there's some myths about executive orders, that the president can sign them into the law. That's not true. That's been told many, many years, that he can just take the stroke of a pen, he can sign it in. That is not true. He has a panel of 3 guys, because we have a fair and balanced system. He has to have a panel of 3 guys that also sign. Now, it's fair and balanced, I know, because the president gets to pick who those guys are. So I'm sure it's fair and balanced. Okay. But 10,990, it gives this panel power to control highways, modes of transportation, and seaports. 10,995, power to seize control of communications, media, internet, radio, and TV. I thought they already had control of that. 10,997, power to control electricity, fuel, and minerals. 10,998, power to seize all means of transportation, including personal cars, trucks, boats, and planes, etc. By the way, they already own them. Did you know that if you register your vehicle, that you don't get the title, you just get a certificate of title, which is not the title. The state owns title to your vehicle. That's why they can take it away from you. Because it's not your vehicle. You gave it to them. Even if you paid cash for it, it still belongs to them. 10,999, power to seize all food supplies and farms, including personal food supplies and farms. 11,000 allows government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. 11,001 gives power over health, education, and welfare functions. 11,002 gives the postmaster power to register all citizens, and probably soon all guns. 11,003, power to control all private and commercial airports and aircraft. 11,004 allows housing and finance authority to relocate communities, build new housing, and designate areas to be abandoned. May be coming to a town near you. 11,005, power over railroads, inland waterways, and storage facilities, and the scariest one of all is 11,921, gives FEMA control of the banks. That is scary. Have you ever seen how those people spend money? When I worked with them, they had a $4 trillion a year budget. The biggest budget in the federal government, $4 trillion a year. They would burn money. I mean, these people just had so much, and they had to spend it all. Because if you didn't spend it all, they'd reduce your budget. They'd call me up and say, "You've got $50,000 left for the last quarter. You better not have a dime left at the end of this quarter." They'd call me and tell me that. You better not have any left. Not $1. And so I'd have to be creative. And I would go out. I had $50,000 to $70,000 a year in my budget. I didn't even need most years, and I had to spend it. So, and so, the politicians in that county down there in Florida were used to the emergency management director before me just give that to them. Well, the first time they voted to take $50,000 of my budget, I called them up and said, "What do you mean?" "Well, it was excess, and we wanted to put it over in the county general fund." I said, "I'm not going to sign off on it." "What do you mean you're not going to sign off on it?" "Just what I said. I'm not going to sign off on it. That money is for projects to build emergency management functions here in this county, and that's what we're going to use it for. But the county's already voted to take your money." I said, "They can't do that." I said, "It's not in their control." I said, "The only person that can then spend that money is me. I was appointed by the governor of the state in that job, and I'm the only signature that can spend that money. And I wouldn't give it, so they had to give it back to me." Upset a few of them. But the bottom line is this, is that all these executive orders are aimed at taking total and complete control. And there's a whole lot more than this. These are old now. There's a lot more new ones now that are probably a lot more scary than these. We've got a quote for you. "The time is near at hand which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves." Who wrote that? George Washington wrote that. It's as true today as it was when he wrote that. Whether you're going to be free men or whether you're going to be slaves is going to be determined by what you do. You'll get a copy of all this. You don't have to write it down. All of this stuff that I'm showing you, you're going to get on in your workbook and on the disc. But today, that's just as true as it was 233 years ago when Washington penned that. He understood the situation he was in. You are in the same situation today. And depending on what we do in this group right here, I'm not talking, we can't put it off on other people now. It's up to you and I and other Americans to stand up and take our nation back. Your nation is in jeopardy and it needs your help. All right, there's some sources, media sources. You don't have to write this down because you'll get a copy of this. Some references. You might want to check me out. I'll tell every class, don't believe anything I tell you. I don't want you to. I want you to go prove me wrong. I issue that challenge to every class. You know how many times I've been proven wrong? Never. Never. I've had attorneys, I've had judges, I've had bankers, I've had all kind of people come to my classes and listen. I've had people call me at my home. I've had people come to have private meetings with me about all this kind of stuff. And not one of them has ever proved me wrong. Never. It's because what I'm telling you is the truth. And I'm going to show you this process. Okay, we have a few minutes here before lunch. I want to take some questions. And then we're going to go take lunch. But I want to answer some of your questions if I can. If you have a question, please write it down. I will do my best to answer your questions. And if I don't know, I will tell you I don't know. Because I don't know everything. There's a lot I wish I did know.
Tim, the first question is, can a city commissioner that is also a federal prison employee work the system that you're defining, that you will define?
Anybody can do this system, but he may run into some problems being a federal employee. I don't know the status of this individual and don't know whether they're near retirement or whatever, but okay, I'm not... He's probably going to run into some problems if he does it with his job, yeah. Because they frown on this.
Where are the executive orders that received prior executive orders, and when did you start this search or research?
I'm sorry now?
Where are the executive orders that, that rescind prior executive orders?
I don't know of any that are rescinded.
When did you start this search and research?
I've been researching this subject for almost 20 years.
If a lawyer responded to a negative averment with an affidavit, a lot of this is getting ahead. Those of you that are new, a lot of this is getting ahead.
Yeah.
Should I hold those questions until we get to that section?
That's getting way in advance.
Exactly.
We don't want to confuse anybody. If we can stay on point, let's try to stay in each segment and ask questions referring to the segment that we were just talking about.
Okay. Other questions? Here's one. Jim?
And I will answer your questions. You'll find out if you'll stick on topic, though, I'll answer most of them before I get finished with that segment.
How does time travel, especially by air? Oh, how do I
travel?
Time. I thought
I travel in a 2008 GMC pickup truck mostly, I can tell you. That's most of the travel we do. We like to travel by air. I like to fly, but they won't let me take my Uzi on the airplane no more. I mean, no, I'm kidding. I don't have an Uzi, so that's just a joke. But I tell everybody, we carry sound equipment and other types of equipment with us. And when you leave home for 2 months, it takes us quite a bit of stuff. Going on an airplane would be a nightmare. Traveling by jet would be just absolutely, yes, sir. So we have to take books and CDs and computers and printers and all of our luggage and stuff. And we have. Oh, by the way, does anybody like grapefruit? I've got some fresh picked grapefruit just picked 2 days ago in a truck, and I was forced to take a truckload before I could leave Phoenix. Under gunpoint, you got to take a truckload of grapefruit. No, just joking. No, a friend of ours gave us a bunch of grapefruit. We were going to give it out here at the seminar, so anybody that wants some can have it. We'll set some of that out. In fact, Doc, if you want to, well, we'll do it this afternoon, so you'll just take whatever you like. We want to make sure that people eat it. We don't want it to go to waste, but we got some very good white and pink grapefruit. Anyway, we can't travel on a jet because of all of our equipment. We would have so much. We've got a swinging truckload of stuff, and you just can't travel by air and do that. But here pretty soon, I'm planning on having my own private jet because I understand that one of the lawyers that I got to lean against has got a nice one. So then I can carry my equipment with me. So we're going after that here shortly.
And how this?
I meant just from an identification as a secured party as opposed to not a U.S. citizen, not just physically why you classify it.
Okay. And the
Likewise, the next one.
and the next question is, how do you prepare your tax returns?
I do the OID. I do the OID process. No, I have somebody do it for me. No, I do OID because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's the proper way to do taxes. Now, I don't teach the OID, so please don't ask me OID questions because I don't teach that class. Time won't allow it, won't permit me because we have too much to cover. But if you have questions about the OID process, we have people that are available to help with that. So if you let Billy Ray know, he can put you in touch with the people.
By the 10th Article of Confederation, we are still under the Articles of Confederation. The Constitution was not passed by all 13 states. It was passed by a committee of 9, so it was not unanimous.
That's true. That is true. And that's the reason that the Republic is going all the way back to the Articles of Confederation, because we realize that. And so when I talk about the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation are going to be the Constitution, basically. But this goes back a lot further than that. A lot of people don't understand that the rules that we live by under the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution go all the way back to what is known as the Guswinta, which was a treaty made between the Pilgrims on the Mayflower and the Indian nations that were here at that time. And the Guswinta is the name of it, and our law goes all the way back to there. The Founding Fathers didn't write the Constitution, and this is recorded in the annals of history and has been hidden from the people for a long time. But when the Guswinta was written by the Mayflower, the people on the Mayflower, and the Indians came together, and a heavenly being actually descended down and presented this to them and helped them write it. They didn't come up with this. This was actually given by God, and this is recorded, but it's been kept from the people. So our Constitution, regardless of whether it's Articles, Confederation, Constitution, or any of the laws that we've been governed by, they all originated from that document, and so it was God's law. That's why I teach about God's law, because God's law is the basis of our law. And that's the bottom line. Any other questions? Well, I'm going to take a break at this point and go to lunch. It's lunchtime. Does anybody know enough about the area to give people some suggestions? I know there's a great little Chinese restaurant, but I appreciate you brave souls for coming back for the afternoon session. Okay. I've got some fruit on the back table. Always. Okay. Thank you. All right. We want to talk about the Constitution versus corporate law. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about how the Constitution is the law of the land, and that's very true. It is. The Constitution has never been repealed. It has never been amended out of existence. They've never done anything to change it. It just sits there. It just sits there. Now, Congress did not have the authority to do away with the Constitution, because only you and I can do that. Only the people can do away with the provisions. Now, we have the authority and we have the power by doing a constitutional amendment or another constitutional convention possibly and changing that. But in reality, other than that, Congress does not have the authority, and any authority that they have taken has been done unlawfully. Any law that they have passed that has done away with any of the provisions or overrode the provisions or trampled on the provisions of the Constitution is known as a bill of attainder, and it's not a law at all. It's a void law. It doesn't matter. It's of none effect, as if it had never been passed. So the Congress doesn't have the authority to do this. So what they try to do is they pass these laws and they become what is known as law by custom. And the way that works is they pass a law, and if you don't protest it, it becomes law. For instance, how many people know that in the state of Florida, and I'm sure it's that way in a lot of other states, I can only speak for Florida because that's the one that I dealt with, there is no provision in the law whatsoever for you to have a driver's license. There's no law. But 15 million Floridians have a license. Why is that? So, several years ago we had a case. It's called Ricky Licciardello versus, the state of Florida versus Ricky Licciardello, down there in Bay County, Florida. Ricky was in my group. He got arrested, put in jail for not having a license and a tag on his truck. They put him in jail for it. I went down there and paid his bond, $500, got him out of jail. So when Ricky got out of jail, he said, they can't arrest me. I don't have to have a license. He said, I don't have to have a license to travel. I said, right. You got the right to travel. But they didn't charge him with traveling. They charged him with driving, which is a commercial offense. Driving is a commercial activity, and it means you're getting paid to do it. He wasn't getting paid. He was driving. He was traveling in his private automobile, and it was not a commercial activity. So I went down, helped him put some stuff together in this case, and he went down and filed his brief and everything, and we went to the DMV, and we sent them a notice that they were in violation of the law, and ultimately we perfected a lien for $150 million against the principal of the head of the DMV in Florida. Her name was Sarah Lambert. We went down and served the lien on them, the notice for $150 million. They owed us $150 million because they were in violation of the man's civil rights. And when they did that, they called my office. A guy named Mr. Prokosh, T.N. Prokosh was his name. He said, Mr. Turner, he said, we received this lien against us for $150 million. He said, and I'm trying to figure out what it's about. And I told him, well, you had a friend of mine arrested illegally for traveling in his private automobile. And I said, your commercial agents charged him with driving. He was not driving. That is a commercial enterprise. He was not being paid to travel in his private automobile. I said, so you illegally charged a man. I said, put him in jail. I said, somebody's going to get this straightened out. I said, if you don't, it's going to be $150 million is going to go against your bond. Well, they said, well, what can we do to resolve it? I said, send me a letter stating that he doesn't have to have a license to travel in his private automobile. And he said, well, I'll send it out to you. I said, well, Mr. Prokosh, obviously you know that the law does not require a person to have a driver's license unless they're in a commercial operation. He said, that's correct. I said, then why do you put people in jail every day for traveling without a driver's license? He said, it's all about revenue. He said, 15 million people in Florida pay us every so often to get a license. He said, it's revenue. He said, it adds up to a lot of money. He was honest about it. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's all about revenue. I said, send me the letter. We'll dismiss the lien. And we did. And we filed that letter into the case. And, buddy, when we went back to court, The judge called his name and bam, case dismissed, just like that. Didn't even let him speak. You can go down to the court in Bay County, Florida, because that's where the case was. You can't even find a mention of that case. I wonder why. I don't anymore. Ricky's got it, and I don't even know where Ricky's at anymore. But we had it for a long time. But if I kept copies of everything that I've done, I'd have to carry a semi-trailer around with me. But the bottom line is that they know that they're violating the law. They understand it. And when they find out that you understand it, you'll find that they'll just go away and be glad to do it most of the time. How many of you here have IRS coming after you for a claim? A lot of people do. I'm sure almost all of you know somebody that's had that problem or have had that problem in the past. How many of you ever submitted a 4490 form? Can't find it on irs.gov. It's something I'm going to have to give Denise to put on the website. But the irs.gov doesn't have it. You can't even go down to the office and get it. They'll tell you what you're talking about. But the 4490 is the required by law proof of claim form that an IRS agent has to sign before they can come after you for a claim. And they have to sign it under penalty of perjury, under oath. Now, do you know why they don't want to have them out there? Well, I happen to have those, by the way. And we can make those available. In fact, I want to make it available to everybody in America as soon as possible. They took it out of their offices. They won't even you can't even get it anymore. But they're required by law to do that. You'll take 2. There's 5 copies, and one goes to a different address, and I got the whole thing. We can make that available to y'all.
Not in the book?
No, this is not in the book. But we can make it available. We need to put it on the web. We need to put it on the web so we can download it. That would be the best way to do it. I'll get with Denise and get her to help make that happen. I know just a little bit less than nothing about computers, and she knows everything. So I'll let her do that. We talked a little bit about lawful versus legal earlier. Now, when you're talking about lawful, we're talking about the Constitution, God's law. It requires a victim. It has to do with what's right and wrong. It has to do with justice, equality, restitution. And that we find that in the republic system or in admiralty law is about that. That's the system we like to operate under is admiralty, and we'll share a lot of that with you. Now, what we're operating under in most of these courts, they want to keep you in equity law, what they call equity law. Well, equity, I don't know why they named it equity, because it's not equitable at all. It's about justice, but justice to them means just us. And that's exactly what they mean. When they say just us, that's what they mean. Because they're the ones that has the advantage, and they take advantage. Everything okay? Okay. So, the justice system has nothing to do with justice under equity laws. The justice system has to do with basically corporate greed. It has to do with picking your pocket. It has to do with revenue. It has nothing to do with justice. Now, in the equity side of the law, in the courts that we currently are dealing with most of the time, those courts don't require a victim. It doesn't even require damage to be done. When you get a traffic ticket for speeding, who was a damaged party? There's not a damaged party. When you get a parking ticket, who was a damaged party? No such thing as a damaged party. It's not required in the laws of equity. So they operate a system of what I call smoke and mirrors. And the judge, he can use his smoke and mirrors, just like the Wizard of Oz, and make you think he's this big, omnipotent, most ultra-powerful thing out there when in reality he's really this little skinny runt that don't have much power at all. His power comes from his deception. The deception he brings on you when you go into the courtroom, and he's up there high and mighty and doing his smoke and mirrors and making you think he's the powerful Oz. And in reality, he's very vulnerable. Because no matter what they say, the maxims of law still apply. The maxims of law, natural law, still applies. And just so you'll know, there are over 1,100 of those. And it covers everything he does. We're going to share a few of the key ones with you this weekend and let you understand how to take those, because he is responsible for these maxims of law. Now, a maxim of law is a law that is so old and well established it cannot be challenged. These things go back to antiquity, all the way back to the Garden of Eden. You stole my cow, you got to give me a cow back. You damaged my property, you got to restore me. Okay, equity court has nothing to do with that. And in fact, I'll tell you a little story. True story happened to a friend of mine down in Florida. He was gone to town for a couple of hours, and some teenage boys broke into his house, and they stole $20,000 out of his bedroom while he was gone. Well, his grandson had been hanging around with the boys up there at the property. He didn't know they had stolen $20,000, but he did know they were in the house. So 2 and 2 still adds up and makes 4 in most people's math. So the guy figured out, well, these are only kids that were up here this afternoon, so they probably, they weren't little kids. They were like 18, 19, 20 years old. They weren't kids, really. They were young people. And so he called the police when he discovered his money was missing, which was just a few hours after they had gotten it. Well, it wasn't no time. Cops pulled them over, and they found they had like $19,500 in the trunk of the car. And so they arrested him. Well, the boys stole $500 from him. And that's wrong, and they should be dealt with for the theft, and they were. But the state took the man's $19,500 and they entered it into evidence and kept it for 8 months. And that was bad enough. They should have done an evidentiary receipt on the money and gave him back his money, but that's not what they did. But then they had the insult to injury. 8 months later, when the case was over, they gave him a bill for 25% of the money. They charged him 3%. Actually, it was 24%. They charged him 3% a month of his money just to hold it for him. So who hurt him worse than who were hurt him the worst? The guys that stole it from him, or the state that ripped him off? So who was the real criminal? The state was more of a criminal than the guys they put in jail. And this is the way the system of equity works. It has nothing to do with justice. It has nothing to do with restoring or restoration or restitution. It has nothing to do with fixing the problem. Admiralty is another matter. And that's what I want you to learn about this weekend, is about our admiralty claims, because they can balance the books, and they can restore you, and they can punish the wrongdoers. And we'll show you how to do that this weekend. And it is so simple, it is so easy, that any of you here can do it. Dylan can do it right here. He can do it. He puts most of y'all to shame. I hate to tell you that, but he does. You know, he's already got his bonds and stuff done. He's the man. He's the man. Okay. But when we deal with admiralty, the law is the contract. The contract is the law. And when you're dealing with absolutes, you can't use the smoke and mirrors. So when we bring a judge out of his equity court and place him in admiralty, the law applies, and it's in black and white, what he can and what he cannot do. So he's not in Oz anymore. He's back in Kansas. And he doesn't like Kansas because the real law applies in Kansas. And that means he can take a liability position in Kansas and actually have to pay you. I've got some of them paying me right now. These guys are in serious trouble, and they may even spend their retirement years in prison under the RICO Act, possibly. But their careers are over. And they let a little $6 million, well, it was a $2.3 million claim, but there's $6 million worth of property destroy the lives of 4 law firms, 12 attorneys, a bank president, and a federal judge. and the owner of a communications company. They destroyed their lives trying to steal a man's property. Admiralty law has to do with the contract. And he who writes the contract wins. If you don't, you're not a very good contract writer. And I'm going to show you how to write the contract from hell. This thing is bad. I'm telling you, this is bad. They can't beat it. There's no way to win because, remember what I told you about the maxims of law? They have to abide by them. They're not abiding by them because you give them permission not to. But when you bring that to their attention and make them abide by the rules of the contract, and they step outside of that, then they take on a liability, and that's when we come and put a hammer on them. And we'll show you about the hammer will be Monday. But you'll like the hammer. Let's talk a little bit about the elements of a contract. And these are some of the basic elements of a contract. There are others, but these are the main ones we deal with. And the first one, of course, is offer. Second, acceptance. Consideration, full disclosure, legal signature, and acquiescence. All of these are very, very important elements of a contract, and they're not, they're absolutely required. They're not optional. They're required by law. Okay, now, if I want to buy this laptop from Rick right here, and I tell Rick, I want to give you $500 for your laptop. He says, no, I've got to have a little more than that. I want $600 for your laptop. And we do a negotiation, and we come up to an offer and an acceptance. He says, okay, well, we'll settle for $550. And so I make the deal with him to buy his computer there for $550. Okay? The next thing that has to happen to seal the contract is I have to give him consideration. So I got to give him something of value for his something of value, which has to exchange hands here. So I have to give him the consideration, which is the money, $550, and he gives me the computer. Okay, so we have a contract. We have a deal, right? Well, when I bought the computer, Rick told me that the computer worked just fine. He didn't tell me that it had shorted out. Lightning hit it last night and fried the circuits. And it won't even turn on anymore. And so I take the computer home, and I plan to go start using my computer, and it won't even come on. And so I pick up the phone and call Rick. I said, Rick, you know, this computer you sold me doesn't work. And he says something, well, I'm not going to give you money back. Buyer beware is the rule here. You know, you got to be careful. I said, well, you got a problem there, Rick, because you didn't give me full disclosure. So if I didn't give full disclosure, then I can cancel, I can void the contract. And I can take him into court, and I can beat him on that element if I can prove that we had an agreement. And it could be a written contract, or it could be a verbal contract. If I've got two witnesses, I actually beat a guy in court on a verbal contract with two witnesses one time. In a business deal. And so I go and say, I don't want the computer anymore, I want my money back, and he refuses. So I take him to court. Now, am I going to get $550 back? No, I'm going to get my $550 plus 3 times in damages, plus court costs. Okay, now what if I bought the computer from him and he says, you know, he said, Tim, I'm going to give you 7 days to decide whether you want the computer to check it out and see if it's good. And I go home and set it on my desk, and I go off on the road, and I come back 2 weeks later and I open up the computer, it doesn't work. Can I come back on him then? No, because he gave me 7 days to prove I wanted the computer. And then after that, we have a binding contract, and I can't go back on him because what did I do? I acquiesced on the contract. I didn't follow up. I gave away my rights. This is how the courts do it to you. They do it by acquiescence. They send you something, and you stick your head in the sand and don't respond. When you don't respond, you lose by acquiescence. And then you have a contract, and it is legally binding. IRS does it to you all the time. How many people do you know that won't even open a letter from the IRS that send it back? Doesn't matter if you open it or not. You're responsible. The best thing to do is answer it. If you don't agree with it, tell them you don't agree with it. Then you break the contract. But if IRS sends, that's how we learn this process actually, is for watching IRS. IRS will send you a bill for $10,000, and if you don't respond within 14 days or whatever the time limit, they may say 10 days. If you don't respond within the 10 days, you owe them the money. And they can enforce it, and will enforce it. So we learn these tricks from dealing with these people, and now we use those same tricks on them. And we learned that they acquiesce too, because they don't think you can do anything, and we're going to show you how to do that. The Uniform Commercial Code, United States Code, statutes, regulations, and ordinances are forms of equity law. These are forms of law that we deal with today. They are not necessarily law, but they are what's called color of law. Now, some of them do represent the real law, God's law, Constitution. Some of them do uphold that, but quite often they don't. They skirt around the edges or just actually go against it, because they are not the law of the land. They are not God's law. So therefore, we need to understand that we need to make these people abide by the real law, and we can, and we're going to show you how to do that. In 1938, the law merchant was taken out of common law and placed under equity in the courts. This changed the system of pleas to a confession or avoidance instead of one of demurrer, so that the evidence in law could be excluded from a case at the judge's will. This was accomplished by changing the laws by the Federal Reserve Act and the income tax laws. Now, how many of you have seen people in the Patriot movement in the past go into court, could absolutely prove that they were not a taxpayer in the law, and lose? I've seen it. Absolutely. Irwin's very sharp. He knows. But Irwin made one fatal error. He made a plea. You can't plea in these courts. Prior to this system that was set up, you had an opportunity to do what's called a demurrer, which you could argue with the complaint. You could argue that that's the wrong charge, or you could argue that I'm not a taxpayer. Today, all they want you to do when you go to court is say guilty, not guilty, or no contest on plea day. How many of you seen that? If you want to see it, go in traffic court. If you want some good entertainment and you haven't got nothing to do on traffic day, go sit in on traffic court. You will be amazed what you learn about court just watching traffic court. I used to love to just go sit down and watch them. Bam, $750. Bam, $350. Bam, $400. Bam, $225. Bam, $1,000. Bam, $1,200. Bam, $1,500. Bam, $700. All morning long, running them through there like cows. Just like cattle. And charging them revenue after revenue. And I live in a little town, there's probably not over 25 or 30,000 people in the whole area, the town that we live in little suburbs around it. And every time we go to traffic court, there's probably 130 or 40 people there every week, twice a week. They're just generating revenue. Help pay for that court. Last time I was there was 135 people. And we had fun. Tied them up for about 3 hours. Yeah. Well, good. That's good. I need to learn from you then. Yeah, I call that clogging the toilet of justice. Well, that's good. That's a good thing. But the bottom line is we've got to understand, now, when you go into these courts, especially in tax cases, if you make a not guilty plea, you have accepted the presumptions of the court. And what is the presumption of the court? That you're a taxpayer. And that you're a debtor to the corporation. And what should your plea be? I want to speak to the district attorney. And the judge is going to say, well, I want a guilty or not guilty plea out of you, or no contest plea, or something like that. Excuse me, I don't know enough to plea. I've got to talk to the district attorney, or the state's attorney, U.S. attorney, whoever it is. And then when I talk to that attorney, I'm going to tell him, I don't know why I'm here. I'm not a taxpayer. And you can go that route if you want to, and I know a better way. So just throwing that up for any of you guys that are still wanting to go out there and fight the IRS. I want to show you how to make the IRS your friend. I want you to learn how to make them your friend, and just help them out. They're misunderstood. They just need a good hug, as Doc says. That's what Doc, he tells me, he said, these folks just need a good hug. They line up. Line up. Need a bunch of huggers, some of them. And anyway, the bottom line is the IRS only, I want you to understand how to speak IRS during this seminar this weekend. And all the IRS wants to do is balance the books. It's nothing about you, and they just want to balance the books. They're under pressure to balance the books, and that's what we want you to learn how to do. Now, it's that simple. It really is that simple. We do it all the time. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have stubborn cases. I've got one I've tried, and it's a personal thing with an agent, and they just won't let it die. And they keep it up. So we've changed the rules a little bit. Now the agent is going to have to pay taxes. So we sent them a note and put their name on it for $10 million, along with the IRS and the Treasury. And now we're going to do a 1099-M when we get home on this agent. Do you know what happens to an agent that fails to pay their income taxes by the 15th of April? They're out of a job. Now, we had one guy down there, and he's the head of his name is William Rutledge, and he's the head of the IRS down in the southeast area, and all over this southeast area, or the southeast area. I don't know if y'all would be considered southeast. Y'all are south. Y'all are they're kind of south. I don't know what y'all are. Y'all in Texas. It's different. But anyway, the southeast region over there, he's the head of it. He came by to do an audit one day because he was after a friend of mine that had been in the movement for years. And before he left, we gave him a copy of Freedom to Fascism to watch. He never did comment on that. But he did the guy's audit and said he was okay. He dismissed the audit, so he might have, maybe he looked at it. But anyway, he came down on another friend of mine and was harassing him, so we sent him a $10 million note, and he refused to accept it. So we did 3949A on it. We're waiting on that. And if that don't work, I'm going to do a 1099M on Mr. Rutledge, because he's got $10 million of my credit. Somebody's got to pay the taxes on that. So we'll send him a 1099M and one to the IRS. And next year, guess what's going to happen? Mr. Rutledge is going to have to pay taxes on that money, because he dishonored the note. He didn't return it, by the way, either. If he'd returned it, it wouldn't have mattered, but because he can't return it without giving me the deficiencies on the note. But remember, when you want to go into these courts, if you want, the best way to win in court is stay out of court. But if you have to go, that's not something that's terrible. I like going to court. I enjoy it. I really do. Some days I'd rather go to court than go to Disney World. And it's a whole lot. Well, Mickey and Goofy's already there. Just going to see old friends. Really, some of these courts are hilarious. You just go in there and watch them. They really are. I love to hear lawyers whine. That's one of my pastimes. I love that. But Judge, you got to get him to sign a release. I had fun with those guys. But when you grab them and they start whining, it gets entertaining. They don't think you can do that. But when you slip up on them, and we're going to show you how to do that and how easy it really is, these guys don't even see it. It's like a train with a headlight out. They don't even see it coming. They can hear something, but they don't know what it is. And they're standing on the track. And it's kind of surprising. Have you ever seen up close a train? I had a friend of mine They had a train. You can't see that light unless you're right in front of it on a train. You ever seen that? Unless you're right in the field of that light, almost directly in front of it. You can't see that light. It doesn't shine out to the side. It's right straight ahead, right down the track. It's just a narrow track, and that's all they want. And so they focused that thing into a narrow beam. I had a buddy of mine was going to work one morning about 4 o'clock in the morning, and they had the train parked at a crossing back. You couldn't really see it because it was behind a bunch of buildings. And he had the light on, but you could, like I say, you couldn't see the light. In this area, there was a bunch of street lights and all, so you wouldn't have noticed it really. And so it was right in the middle of the town, and he crossed that, and he looked to the left, and the train was parked right there with that light on, and he almost come unglued. He almost wrecked his truck. It wasn't moving, but he didn't know. That startled him because he saw the light. Well, these guys are not even going to see the light. The train's going to hit them before they know it's coming. The United Nations Treaty Atlantic Charter, Articles 55 and 56, converted our God-given unalienable rights into privileges and immunities, giving us limited liability as corporations in commerce. Now, the law is pretty specific about what we can and we can't do. Let's see if I can find something. I'm going to read a little something to you. The law allows us to do what we're doing. And the reason, I'm going to share that with you, why we can do what we do. I say I am. There it is. Now, what do you do when people look at you like you're a three-headed alien? And they tell you, I don't believe that stuff, and I have this happen all the time. You think you can write notes? I've had lawyers and judges ask me. I actually testified in federal court about this. What makes you think you can write a note? I said, law. Well, would you mind explaining that to me? That's what they call it, splain down there in Alabama. Would you mind explaining that to me? I told him, yeah, I'll explain it to you. So I told the judge, got on the witness stand, and I explained it to him. So, and I told him about, not only about the process, but about his fraud and all this kind of stuff. And I tried to get that judge to go off, and he wouldn't do it to save me. I poked him in the eye 2 or 3 times, and he wouldn't do it. And but they had a U.S. Marshal that was sitting on the other side of the bench, just on the other end of it over there. And I couldn't see him, but Billy Ray told me, he said, he was actually standing up over his seat with his head poking around the bench listening, trying to listen to every word I said. That man was really interested in what I was talking about. And when I got finished, the lawyer said, well, Mr. Turner, if what you say is true, I said, what I said is true. He said, but if what you say is true, what stops everybody in America from writing these notes? I said, nothing but pure ignorance. Nothing but ignorance. Well, how can I sit in court and testify to that? Because I've read the law. And I'm going to share something with you. And I'm not going to read this whole. This is a 13-page memorandum that lays out a lot of the points of law. And I'm going to give you a copy of this. It's going to be on your disc, where you can read it for yourself. This is what you use to tell people that you don't know what you're talking about. Because this is right out of the law. This is out of congressional decisions, Supreme Court decisions, and right out of the United States Code and out of the Uniform Commercial Code. And this is science. You can go research it. Go prove me wrong. Nobody's been able to do it yet, but if you do, you can prove that I am wrong about what I teach you this weekend. You just come, I will fly you to my next seminar, pay all your expenses to come, embarrass me in front of the crowd, and I will apologize to you in front of all of them. And I don't believe you can do it. Nobody's done it yet. I've challenged a bunch of them. Yeah, you've been trying? You haven't done it yet either, have you? But I'm going to read something here to you. I want you, and I'm going to explain what we're talking about here. To some of you folks that are new, you need to get a grasp on this because it's very important. Because we're talking about law. We're not talking about something we dug up on the internet. This is what it says in the law. Right out of the Uniform Commercial Code, United States Code, and many other places. I'm going to share a couple of things with you, but you need to read this. Those who constitute an association nationwide of private unincorporated persons engaged in the business of banking to issue notes against these obligations of the United States do them. What? Now wait a minute, let's back up a little bit. I want to make sure you understand what I just read. Those who constitute an association nationwide of private unincorporated persons. Who do you think that might be? That's us. Private unincorporated persons. Not talking about banking corporations here, folks. We're talking about me and you. Engaged in the business of banking to issue notes against these obligations of the United States do them. You know, are we engaged in the business of notes? Absolutely. They do them all the time. Have they ever sent any back? One time. In all the years I've been doing it, I've got one note back, and that was just recently. And hadn't figured that out yet because I sent two notes to the same company at the same time. They were identical except they were different numbers and the amounts were different, but they were to the same institution. Sent them in two different envelopes. I sent them to the same office for two different mortgages. They discharged one and sent the other one back and said they couldn't accept that for payment. Go figure. They went to the same office. Don't make any sense. When I get back, I'll figure that one out. I'm going to have some fun with them. Whose private property is at risk to collateralize the government's debt and currency by legal definitions, a national banking association. Did you know that you're part of a national banking association if you write notes? That's what it says. I didn't make this stuff up. Such notes issued against these obligations of the United States to that part of the public debt due its principals and sureties are required by law to be accepted as legal tender of payment for all debts and are defined in law as obligations of the United States on the same par and category with Federal Reserve notes and other currency and legal tender obligations. Did you understand what I just read you out of the code? Do you think we can do this? It says in the law we can. The instrument tendered to the bank and negotiated to the United States Treasury for settlement is an obligation of the United States under Title 18 United States Code Section 8, representing as the definition provides a certificate of indebtedness drawn upon an authorized officer of the United States, in this case the Secretary of Treasury, issued under an act of Congress, in this case Public Law 7310, Title 31 U.S.C. 3123 and 31 U.S.C. 5103, and by treaty, and UNCITRAL, which is the United Nations Convention on International Bills of Exchange and International Promissory Notes. Okay. Let's see. The United States, Title 31, United States Code, Section 392, 5103, defines this as a statutory legal tender obligation of the United States and is issued in accordance with 31 U.S.C. 3123 and HJR 192, which established and provided for its issuance as public policy in remedy for discharge of equity interest recovery on that portion of the public debt to its principals and sureties bearing the obligations of the United States. This is a statutory remedy for equity interest recovery due the principals and sureties of the United States for discharge of lawful debts in commerce in conjunction with U.S. obligations to that portion of the public debt is intended to reduce. During the financial crisis of the Depression in 1933, substance of gold and silver and real money was removed as a foundation for our financial system. In its place, the substance of the American citizenry, their real property, wealth, assets, and productivity that belongs to them was in effect pledged by the government and placed at risk as the collateral for U.S. debt, credit, and currency for commerce to function. This is well documented in the actions of Congress. See Senate document number 43, 73rd Congress, first sessions. It stated, under the new law, the money is issued to the banks in return for government obligations, bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances. The money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all homes and other property of all of the people in the nation, which lawfully belongs to the private citizens. So we see the full faith and credit of the United States, which is the substance of the American citizenry. Their real property, wealth, assets, and productivity that belongs to them is hereby hypothecated and rehypothecated by the United States to its obligations as well as to Federal Reserve for the issuance and backing of Federal Reserve notes as legal tender for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. Under the 14th Amendment and numerous Supreme Court precedents, as well as in equity, private property cannot be taken or pledged for public use without just compensation or due process of law. The United States cannot pledge or risk the property and wealth of its private citizens for any government purpose without legally providing them remedy to recover what is due them on their risk. This principle is so well established in English common law and in the history of American jurisprudence. The 14th Amendment provides, no person shall be deprived of property without due process of law. And courts have long ruled that one's property legally held as collateral or surety for a debt, even when he still owns it and still has it is to deprive him of it, since it is at risk and could be lost for the debt at any time. The United States Supreme Court said in the United States versus Russell, under private property, the Constitution provides shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. No, I don't. Yeah, please, if you will, hold your questions so we can ask them in front of the mic, so everybody can do that. The rights of a surety to recover on his risk or loss when standing for the debts of another was reaffirmed in 1962 in Perlman versus Reliance Insurance Company, when the court said sureties compelled to pay debts for their principal have been deemed entitled to reimbursement even without a contractual promise, and probably there are few doctrines better established. Well, just to recap a little bit, then, if we are national banking associations, it says we are, we're considered national banking associations, and if we are involved in commerce by writing bills, by writing notes, bills of exchange, and promissory notes, and bonds, and it is the obligation of the United States to honor these by law and give you credit dollar for dollar, why aren't we doing that? That goes back to that ignorance. Well, fear. Yeah, exactly. Didn't the Scripture say, my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge? I'm giving you the knowledge, and I'm giving you the tools. And some of you here are going to have fun. Okay, already. Okay. Some of you are going to like this. Some of you I don't know about. But I can see light bulbs coming on. Okay. The bottom line is this, folks. We have the legal right to discharge our debts with notes. We have the legal right to discharge a court case with a bond. We have the right because Congress mortgaged your house. They mortgaged your car. Like I said a while ago, when you go buy a new car, you give it to the state, and then they go write a bond on it. They bond that and sell it. And your car is the collateral. If they welch on the bond, guess what? Your car is going to get repossessed, even if you have clear certificate of title. The state literally mortgages your car for you. It's a second secret mortgage you don't know about. Your personal home. If you went today and bought a home in Dallas somewhere around here, and you bought it and paid cash for it, you still don't own it. You think you do? Quit paying taxes and see how long you sit in it. They'll take it away from you. Why? When the IRS goes down there and tells the bank they want your money out of the bank, do they give it to them? Why is that? It's not your money. You signed it over to the bank when you did the bank account. It's not your money. They're not giving your money away. So don't get mad. Like a fellow called me up last year. He said, man, I found this great trust. He said, only cost, I think it was $3,500 for this trust and all this kind of stuff, and what it was all going to do. I said, what do you want it for? Well, I want to protect my assets. I said, showed you how to protect your assets. You don't. Why? I don't know about all that stuff. I don't need a trust because all of my stuff is protected without one. If you want my stuff, all of my property's got a $100 billion lien against it in silver, and if you want it, I'll sell it to you. I'll even give you a fire sale, half price. Special price for today only. You satisfy half the lien, I'll give you the property. So I'm upside down so bad they won't want my stuff. Because if they come after it, they're going to have to incur the lien. And they don't want the lien. So I told him, I said, why don't you just do that? Well, I like this process. And then I said, well, why are you calling me? You know I don't do trusts. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't good trusts out there. I'm sure there are. But I just hadn't ever seen a trust I trusted. The problem I have is that, and I hadn't figured this out yet. Now, y'all, somebody here that knows more about this than I do, help me with this. You go out to a stranger you have never met. And he's going to protect your property by putting it in his name. Help me if I'm wrong. I don't understand it. I'm not real bright. And I am from Alabama. And I have been dropped on my head, but I still see through that. So anyway, regardless, I know there's some good trusts. I poke a lot of fun at them, and I know people that are in trust, and they do a good job. They're honorable people. But this one guy, when he called me last year, he said, I think I'm going to go with this trust. I said, well, I don't do that, so you got to do what you want to do, but I don't know why you want to do that. I mean, if you just do what I told you to do, you don't need it. Well, he did. Well, a few months later, he calls me up. That man sold my property. I said, no, he didn't. He sold his property. You gave it to him. I said, you shouldn't be upset. You gave him permission to do everything he did. Yeah, but he didn't give me nothing for it. I said, he didn't have to. You gave it to him. I said, I believe I told you. Why would you give your property to a complete stranger you know absolutely nothing about? Doesn't make sense. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, but that's just me. The bottom line is you need to take control of your own life, and you need to put things in your control and not depend on other people. That's socialism, folks. That's socialism. Putting your life in other people's hands, expecting them to protect you, is socialism. We need to think on our own. Now, I'm not saying the trusts are all bad. There's good trusts out there. I know there are. I know some people that operate them, and they're good people. But if you're going to do a trust, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but make sure you know who you're dealing with, because they can sell your property too if you give it to a trustee. And that's just the bottom line. And he's got every legal right to do it, and there's nothing you can do about it because you gave it to him. And I've seen this happen time and time again to people. So take control of your own affairs and don't let somebody else run your life for you. And that's why I'm trying to teach you a process that you can do just that, and you don't need other people to take care of your life. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the role of the church. Now, I got fussed at last week for this because the boy said, I didn't come to hear you preach. I come to hear you talk about the commercial process. I said, well, you're going to have to listen to this too. So I'll tell you the same thing. If you don't like it, I guess you can walk out. And before I start, I want you to understand I'm not going to pick on anybody's religion or religious beliefs. I don't do that. I'm going to state my opinions and why I have my opinions. And if it steps on your religious beliefs, then it's nothing personal. I'll still let you buy me dinner. So, and I still like you. I will, really will. But I'm going to say some things that might upset some of you, and that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to agree with me. It's not important that you agree with me. It's important that you agree with God. And if you don't agree with me, take it up with Him and tell Him to change my mind if I'm wrong. Okay? And if you get mad at me and want to throw something, make sure it's soft and valuable. When God set up the system of the church, He intended it to be the center of the community. He didn't set up the church to be fractionalized like we have today and everybody warring against each other. It was supposed to be for the benefit of the community instead of having these religious wars. You know, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Catholic, and I'm a Pentecostal, and I'm a this, and I'm a that. That's not what it was all about. We were supposed to come together as a family. And we were supposed to work together as a family and not have these little warring factions going on. The church originally was supposed to be the center of involvement of the community. And one of the roles that the church had, according to Scripture, is to take care of the welfare in their community. Now, there's always going to be poor people in your communities, and there's going to be people out there that are not able to meet their basic needs. That was the job of God's people to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're supposed to cater to the lazy. They ought to starve until they get enough and then go to work. But the bottom line is there are people out there that are in situations that can't take care of themselves by no fault of their own. There are people that are born with defects they can't help. There are people that have tragedies in their lives that cause them to put them there. There's some of you in here probably at one time were very wealthy and prosperous, and you've probably fallen on hard times at one time or another. I've seen times, I've been from rags to riches. I grew up in a home where we didn't have enough to eat. And I promised God that if I grew up, I was going to feed kids, and I have. I fed a lot of them. I'm going to feed a lot more, too. And I've also been a millionaire. And I'm about to become a billionaire. Well, I am a billionaire, actually. But the bottom line is that, you know, I know what it's like from both ends of the spectrum. And so we are supposed to help those that are less fortunate. That's God's way. It doesn't mean we're supposed to put them on a dole program. We're supposed to help people to help themselves. So what I'm doing teaching you is how to help yourself so you can go out and teach others how to help themselves. That's God's way. And the church was supposed to do that as well. We were supposed to teach the people how to survive in our world and how to do finance and how, you know, that's one thing I like about the Mormons. They teach their kids about money. They really do. They teach their kids about how to handle money. Did you know that they're told to put up 10%, no matter what, 10% of their income is supposed to go in savings, and a lot of them do. And you know, most of them by the time they're retirement age are wealthy people because they're taught the basic concepts. And we have been remiss to do that with our families, a lot of us. I didn't know anything about money. I had no idea. I didn't have a clue. You're supposed to go work and make it and spend it. That's all I knew. That's what I grew up with. You're supposed to spend at least 20% more than you make every week. Grew up in that system for a while. Found out that didn't work real good. But so we just didn't know anything about money, and it took me a lot of years to figure out how not to do that. Couldn't figure out how I was always broke all the time since I was only spending 20% more. You know? Like I said, I am from south down there. So, but anyway, I learned that sometimes you got to save for a rainy day, because rainy days are going to come, and they come for everybody. And we're in a situation in America, we've got to learn some of these things. We've got to learn that we're brothers and sisters, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter what background you have. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. We're all God's children, and we need to work together. And we're about to see a time in America where your very survival might depend on that. And I believe it's coming like a freight train with a headlight out toward us. And I think we need to pay attention to what's going on in our nation. The church was organized to keep the money in the local area and to disperse it to the needs of the people. You had the priests, of course, to take care of, the ministers to take care of, and you also had the needs of your local people, the widows and orphans. Didn't Christ tell us to do that? And there were other people out there that needed help too. And there are people that sometimes just need help for a little while and they get on their feet. But you don't know at the times. I know of a church right now, down there near where I live. There's some people who have been in that church for 25 years. Church gets up and brags about how many millions of dollars they got in their budget. 3 of these guys are losing their homes because of business they just closed in their local community that they've been at. Some of them have been there for over 20 years. Business closed, there's no jobs. They're about to lose their homes. 3 of them are in that church. You think the church has offered to help them? Not one bit. The church should be helping them. But our group did. We went out, we're building them 3 brand new homes right now. They don't go to my church. I don't have a church. But they needed help. And they're God's people, so they needed help. So their own church wouldn't do it, so we got our group together and we're building them 3 houses down there right now. They'll be paid for when they move into them. No, they're not fancy. They're not 6,000 square feet like you rich folks down here in Dallas are used to. They're 10,000 square feet. But they're going to keep them warm and dry and have a place for the family to live. And they'll be paid for. They won't have a mortgage payment, and they'll live.
We have in our church people living in the church with the kids because they left their home.
That's right.
Their job and their home. So
that's what the church is about. It's supposed to be about.
we have about 12 families right now living in sleeping bags in the church.
That's right. And that's unfortunate, but thank God they got that, because I passed people sleeping in the woods just the other day on my trip. And it's pathetic. Down in Portland, Oregon, they're living in the woods. Don't have anywhere to live. And what do the police do? They go there and harass them and run them from place to place because they don't want them. Throw them away. Well, some of these people are not deadbeats. Some of them have fallen on hard times, can't help it. When you lose your job, can't find one. How many of you here could stay in your home for 6 months if you lost your job today? It'd be tough on most of us, wouldn't it? Because most of us don't have a tremendous amount of money. And we've got to learn that we've got to work together and help one another, because it might be you need help next month. You don't know what's going to happen to your life. I remember, man, I was on top. I had a great job, had plenty of money, good health. I could buy anything. Great credit, could buy anything I wanted. I didn't need a paycheck. They'd call me from the office down there where I work and say, "Hey, you need to come get your paychecks. You got 7 or 8 of them in your box down here." I wouldn't even go pick them up every 2 months or 3 months sometimes. And they call me, "Come get them out of here. We need to get them out of your mailbox at the administrative office." I didn't need it. And I'd go there and pick them up and go throw them in the bank. Didn't need the money. Had plenty of money. I went to work one morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, and before noon, I was through. Almost got killed in the emergency room with a broken neck, and my whole life changed. Just that fast. Before noon that day. Lost my job, had to move. My wife had to give up her job. And we ended up in the next year. I wasn't homeless, thank God, because I had plenty of money. But what would happen if I hadn't have saved my money and took care of it? God provided for us. But it was 2.5 years before I could do anything. 2.5. How many of you here could live for 2.5 years without an income? It'd be kind of tough, wouldn't it, for a lot of you? And it took everything I had to do it, but I made it. But God always provided, never missed nothing. I certainly didn't miss any meals, you can tell. God always provided more than enough. But the bottom line is this, is it can happen to anybody. And it was of no fault of my own whatsoever. I was doing my thing, working, doing my business. I wasn't out being stupid. I was responsible. And it just, one of those things that can happen to you. And 2.5 years later, I started barely just being able to go back to work. But for 2.5 years, I couldn't. Nothing I could do. But, God provided for me. But it can happen to anybody. So don't look down on these homeless people and think that you're better than they are, because they might have been corporate executives last year. Now, some of them deserve to be homeless, though. But the truth is that a lot of these people came from corporate America and lost their jobs because of the companies going out of business and downsizing, and they didn't do anything to deserve where they're at. Not a thing. And these people are in desperate trouble. 8,000 Americans a day are losing their homes to foreclosures. But if I can stop it, and I can show you how to stop foreclosures. Not only stop foreclosures, how to make money off of foreclosures. Just how much money do they want to spend? I'll show you how to do it. That's what started this $20 billion claim that I have. It was a foreclosure, illegal foreclosure. Now it's ended up they owe me over $20 billion, and they're going to have to pay it. They're going to have to pay it. I'm going to get. We did an estimate on it. Had some private investigators investigate into it for me, and we estimate that we're actually going to collect $50 to $100 million in real money off that claim, and maybe even more, because of that one illegal foreclosure. And I'm going to show you the process I use to do that, step by step, and you can do it too. Every one of you in here can do it. If you have a foreclosure problem, bring it on. I'll say, bring it on, because I'll tell you, they can't beat you. They'll be sorry they ever took it on. Anyway, I got off on one of my rabbit trails there. I do that sometimes. When the churches became 501c3 and corporations, they turned away from God, in my opinion. That's my opinion. You can take that and $2 and get a cup of coffee at the convenience store. But we became sanctioned by the state and not sanctioned by God. We became state churches, which is not really what God wanted. Do you know what started the American Revolution? No, it wasn't taxes. That's what they told. It was religious freedom. It's what started the American Revolution. And I predict that religious freedom will be what starts the new American Revolution. There was a country lawyer named Patrick Henry that traveled the countryside over in the east part of the country. And he was riding his horse through the countryside, and he came upon this town, and I believe it was in Virginia. I don't remember for sure. It's been a long time since I read this stuff. So if it wasn't in Virginia, just act like it was. I don't remember for sure. I believe it was in Virginia. So anyway, he came into this town, and there were 3 men tied to a whipping post in the middle of town, and they were beaten to death by the king's soldiers. Well, he just rode into this. They were dead when he got there, and so he rode down to the local gathering place, and he asked the townspeople, what did these men do? What kind of crime did they commit? And they said, they refused to take a license to preach from the king. And Patrick Henry rode the countryside defending these ministers that didn't want to take a license to preach from the king. And his cry was, give me liberty or give me death. And that cry started the Revolutionary War, because they did not want to be told by the king how to operate the church, because it was against God's law. Today in America, almost every single religion is a 501c3. Not all of them, but almost all of them. 999 out of 1,000 are 501c3 churches in this country. There are a few that know better, but most of them don't. I believe that's a direct violation of God's law to be a 501c3, because then you are a church of the state that is sanctioned by the state and not by God. And I know there are probably some of you here that attend 501c3 churches. Some of you might be ministers. And most of you were brought into this because you didn't understand, because of the ignorance that we have. I was part of one for years. And I wrote my organization a letter, told them you don't need to be a 501c3. I said, you're in violation of God's law. And they thought I was stupid. And they're still a 501c3, and I'm no longer a member. I told them I don't believe in being part of something like that, because today, the 501c3, if your minister preaches something that is contrary to the popular belief of the day, the politically correct version of the day, he can be arrested. So can your members. So I strongly suggest that if you are, that you find a way to get out from under it. Because they are going to start arresting pastors in the near future. They've already started, limited, but it's going to get more widespread in the near future. I think you'll see a creation of a state religion that will be anything but Christian. And this is a Christian nation. And I don't care if you got a Muslim president or whatever he is. Still a Christian nation. And he can try to push that stuff down our throat, and he's going to cause a problem in America, because the people of America will not tolerate it. I can tell you that now. There's enough of us that won't tolerate being forced into a state religion and worship false gods, because we simply just won't do it. Do you believe politics has a place in the church? Well, I used to say that. I don't think politics itself should be in the church, but I think politicians that are in office should come from your churches. Okay? Now we're going to reseat our republic. We're going to reseat our republic. We're working on it. In a few minutes I'm going to tell you the story about that. But the bottom line is this. If we want godly people, we got to get them from godly sources. Now, I know the guy down there is in the Church of Satan is not going to be too good to Christians. Now, does that make sense to you? And if there's any of you Satanists in here, shame on you. I don't really care. The bottom line is that if you want godly principles in government, we've got to put godly people in there to get that. The Scripture tells us if the wicked rule, the people mourn. But if the righteous rule, the people rejoice. Which way do you want to be? I want to rejoice. I don't want to be punished because of these wicked people. Because the wicked always punish the people. Whenever you have a wicked king back in ancient Israel, what happened? He taxed the people. He really put a burden on their neck. Made them work hard. But when they had a righteous king, the people were free and happy. They had plenty. And that's what we need in our country. Not a king, of course, but we need righteous government. Well, I will be the first to say that I don't think that you can get a righteous government in Washington. It's too far gone to fix it. We can't fix Washington. We've got to throw it out and start over. It's impossible to repair the crooked and wicked, evil system that they have created in Washington, D.C. Can't be done. So we need to start over. We need to reestablish the original jurisdiction government of this nation and put righteous rulers back if the American people want to survive. Our system won't survive much longer. Yeah. We won't survive much longer at the rate we're going. They already know the system is coming apart internally. And they're preparing. Many of your congressmen and senators are right now moving everything they have offshore because they know they're going to have to leave. They already know. The church and people in the church should be the guidance of our government, and we should get our political candidates from the church. Now, even when we reestablish the republic, we're going to have to put godly people in office. And the people involved in that process, we talk about it. And I've told them all. I'm not going to tolerate any of the crooks in the government anymore. When we reestablish the republic, if you're going to be crooked, you better get out of it. Because we're not going to tolerate it. The first backroom deal you make, you're going to be tried for treason and executed. That's simple to me, and it's just that simple to me. Because that's what we should have done when the first one did it in Washington. It's what we should be doing to them now. Establishing courts, trying them for treason, and executing the people. That's what the Constitution says. That's what the law requires, and we're not doing it. And I believe that we're going to be held accountable by God Almighty because we have been remiss in our duties to do just that. Judgment's going to come on this nation because we did not. We didn't take care of business when we should have. And we can't pass the buck. I know it was our grandparents and great-grandparents and our parents before us that let this problem happen, but we know about the problem now, so what is our responsibility in it? We're just as responsible because we've got to stand up and say, no more abuse. We're not going to take it anymore, people. The American people are ready. The American people are fed up. And you wait till we have this economic downturn if you think they're fed up now. Is our nation a Christian nation? It would be difficult to prove it in a court of law, I think, because the average American out here is not Christian at all. It's a dog-eat-dog world. There was a time, I grew up in a small town. I was blessed by being raised in a small town where everybody knew everybody. And most people in that town were pretty well basically honest people. If a man shook your hand and told you to do something, he generally did. Now, everybody knew there was a few scoundrels in town, but everybody knew who they were. So you just stayed away from them, and life was pretty good. Today in America, 90% of the people that you deal with will cut your throat. They'll steal your property. They'll take advantage of you. They'll beat you up. They'll do whatever is necessary to get the advantage on you. And now we got the system out here that dictates if you're stupid enough or weak enough to let me do it, it's your fault. We're being ruled by secular humanists. There are no rules. There's no right and wrong. It's all good. It's all good. No right and wrong. No absolutes. That's humanism. And it always ends to the destruction of a society in every single case. We know of 11 different societies at least that have been on this planet that became of world-class status over thousands of years. And they all were destroyed from internal corruption or conquest. They either lost at war, or either they were destroyed by internal corruption. And internal corruption destroyed the greatest empires on earth. The Romans, the Greeks, and the Americans. Internal corruption destroyed our nation. And it's our job to reestablish a proper righteous government where that won't happen again. For it to change, we've got to change as people. So if you're not an honorable, upright person that can be trusted, you don't need to be involved in this process. You need to go on about and be a good little debtor slave and stay out of this process. We don't need you. I don't even want you. If you're a crooked fellow, stay out of it. Or a crooked or a cheat or a liar or a scoundrel or a rascal, go on about your business and don't bother with me because I don't want to be part of what you're doing. I want you to be honorable and above board. I want you to come along with us. And if you have been that way in the past, change. You have the ability to change and become honorable. Everybody can do that. But we don't need people out here that are trying to scam other people to get ahead. We need to come together as brothers and sisters and work together for the very our own livelihood, because we may depend on one another very soon. I've always said the American people are the dumbest people on earth. We never work together anymore. We work against each other. I've seen this. Down in South Florida, there's a big Haitian population down in South Florida. There used to be just a handful of them years ago. And they moved into South Florida down there, in a little town called Immokalee, Florida, is where I first ran into them. And they would bring 20 or 30 of these people and put them in one house and live. And they'd all go out and work in the fields. They had a grandmother and a grandfather that would take care of all the kids and cook all the meals and keep the house. And then all the rest of them would bring their money and they would put it in a community thing. They didn't keep out a few bucks for spending money for lunch and stuff, but they'd bring all their money in and put it in this community pot. A few months would pass. They'd buy the house they were renting. And then they'd have two and then bring some more people in. And then they would, in just a short period of time now, they got two groups working and they bought that house in half the time. And then they'd come together and go get another group. And then three groups were paying for a house. Next thing you know, they own the darn community because they work together. They're smart people. They got lots of money. Now they own all the businesses. Now they own the town. And that's how it started just 20, 30 years ago. They own everything now. And they've made a nice little community out of it. But they work together. The Hispanics do the same thing. The Americans go down there, they buy a 6,000 square foot house. They won't even let their brother or sister visit for more than 2 or 3 days. They run them off. That's the truth. Now, you're laughing, but you know it's true. We can't get along that long. Because we're spoiled. We need to learn to work together. We need to learn to work together because the very survival of our nation may depend on that. The very survival of you and your family may depend on us working together. We have a lot of immorality in the church as well as the community. And it's a shame, but back where I'm from in Panhandle, Florida, I had a used car lot down there, and the saying down there is never buy a car from a preacher, a used car from a preacher, because he'll stick it to you quicker than anybody. And it's a shame, but that's what people say. And I found out in business that was probably a lot of truth in that. If a preacher tells you he's got a nice car, you better go drive it. Well, what's wrong with that, folks? Ministers are supposed to be examples to the community. What kind of example are they showing us? By their fruits you'll know them. That's right. And you don't bear figs on thistles. The fruit will identify what kind of tree you're dealing with. And if it's thistles, it's not a fig tree. So it's not putting forth good fruit, is it? So we have to, what we say, what comes out of our mouth doesn't mean anything. It's the integrity of our heart that's going to matter. That's what God, and what you do. What you do with these hands is what God's going to judge you by. And what you say out of this mouth is going to be judged as well. But your actions are going to indicate what's in your heart. And so we need to get rid of the immorality in our society. We need to have honorable people. And I'm going to get off of that soapbox. I like to bring up the goddess Gaia religion, and some of you here might be part of that, and if you are, shame on you. I ran into some in California. I think I offended them sufficiently. So I might offend you too. That's okay. You can get over it and get used to it. I really don't care. Truth is still the truth. But the goddess Gaia religion is a very dangerous thing to our country because the people that are involved in this religion, and it is very much a religion, believe that the Mother Earth is the goddess and the giver of all life. They don't believe in God like we believe in God. They believe that the goddess is the earth itself brought forth the life. There is no master plan or creator. The earth itself is God. And they believe that because there are so many people on the planet, and estimates, I talked to a guy in CIA the other day that he said there's not 7 billion people on, there's 12 billion people on the planet. The real figure is 12 billion. I had a meeting with him last week, and he told me there's really 12 billion people. They don't make that public, but because they're planning on eliminating a bunch of them. He's a member of the CIA. Had a good, nice little meeting with him for several hours this past week. And he said that they do intend to reduce the population significantly. Well, you got to figure out how are they going to do that. Now, what many of them say, well, the figures run between 500 million and 1.5 billion is the optimum number that they want, depending on who you talk to. Ted Turner is the one that votes for the 500 million, but I bet him and his are not on the list. But he wants to eliminate all but 500 million people on the earth. And there are many other people who feel that same way, because then they won't be robbing the natural resources and causing damage to their goddess. And I tell people this, and I read this years ago. I wish I could remember the book that I read about this. I can't remember anymore. It's been many years ago. But one of the books I read, it was talking about how they really think. And it said that some of them actually wrote books about this kind of things. But if you walk on the beach and you hear the sand squeak between your toes and stuff, you know how it goes. When you're walking on the beach and down there in the panhandle, it's real. That old sand does that really good. And they said when you're doing that, that's the sand crying out in pain, so they don't want people walking on the beach. I'm not joking. This stuff is in print, folks. And they said that when you take a pebble and toss it into a stream or something and it goes ploop, that's the water crying out in pain, so they don't want people crying. This is a sick mindset. But that's what they believe. They really believe. So when we're cutting down trees and all this kind of stuff, and we're using the natural resources of the earth, we're causing harm to their goddess. So what they've got to do is eliminate most of us so we won't destroy their goddess. They believe that too many people are going to cause the destruction of the whole human race, which will include them. So they just want to destroy your part of it so they can live. It's a sick mindset, but that's the way they believe. They're twisted. But how do you think they might be wanting to dispense of many of the population? Well, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Well, that's one way. Only 13% survive them, I heard. I tell you what, it'll make you sick, I promise. But for the grace of God, I would have been one of those that was in the 87%. War is a good one. What about famine? Famine's easy. Yeah, hunger. They plan to use that. What about biological and radiological weapons? Kill a lot of people like that. Yeah, nuclear weapons. Probably won't use too much nuclear, though. Nuclear contaminates the ground, and they want to use that. So that's doing destruction to the goddess, too. So they probably won't use a lot of nuclear, but they can use biologicals, and they rapidly dissipate. They kill the biologicals, and in a few weeks it's okay, safe. You can do that. There's all kinds of things you can do. But the bottom line is, if they're going to eliminate all but say 1 billion, let's go with 1.5 billion. That means they're going to have to kill off a lot of people, and it's going to take a tremendous amount of death and destruction to do that. And some of these people are in our government. Some of these people are sick people. They really are. They're sick people. And so that, it kind of sounds like they would be using something similar to what's mentioned in Revelation, doesn't it? That's kind of a possible thing. But if Christians don't change America, who's going to change it? It's going to change. Which brings me to a part of my presentation that I don't want to upset anybody's religious beliefs, like I said, but I'm going to tell you what I think and what I believe. And if I'm wrong, pray for me that God will show me the truth. Don't get mad with me or angry with me for stating my opinion, and I won't get mad and angry with you for you stating yours. But I'm going to tell you what I think and what I believe and why I believe it. And then you can take that and do whatever you want to with it, I suppose. But I believe that we live in an age that could possibly see the return of Christ. I believe we live in that era of time for a number of reasons. I believe we're seeing some of the signs that God told us that we would see in the last generation. One of the significant signs, I believe, is the restoration of Israel. With that prophecy, he said you would see Israel would bud and bring forth leaves. It's a two-part prophecy. And so I prayed, and I didn't understand that. I prayed and asked God to show me what it meant. And He did. He showed me that when Israel budded was when it gained its independence in 1948. But it put forth leaves in 1967 when it gained its capital, Jerusalem. It's a two-part prophecy. So the generation that saw the return of Jerusalem to the Jews and the establishment of the nation of Israel, I believe in 1967, probably could have possibly started to count down to that generation that he's talking about. Now, I don't know absolutely that's true. That's my personal belief that that's true. But I don't have any other documented evidence except what I'm seeing in the Scriptures to back it up. One of the best books that I like to study, my favorite, is the 24th chapter of Matthew that breaks this all down and tells you what is going to happen. It gives us 3 periods of time he talks about. The first is the beginning of sorrows. The second is the great tribulation. And the third is the day of the Lord. Now, these things are what Christ said, not what I said. Now, in the first period of time, the beginning of sorrows, Christ tells us what's going to happen. Earthquakes, famines, pestilences, wars, rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, which is a very interesting prophecy, because if you'll go look at the book written by Gary Kahl called En Route to Global Occupation that was put out in the 90s, he's got a map of the world in there that was created by the World Constitution and Parliament Assembly. And in that map of the world, it's got 10 kingdoms. God said nation will rise against nation, and then kingdom against kingdom. The New World Order will be referred to as kingdoms. What's the head of a kingdom? A king. You think we're going to have a problem in America with an oligarchy at least? Absolutely. You're going to have a central, small group of people, an oligarchy, with a head man, might be called a president, might be called something else. But you're going to have somebody at the head of that small group oligarchy of people here in this country if we don't change it. Now, people tell me all the time, Christian people tell me all the time, I don't have to worry about that because God's just going to come down here and He's going to rapture me out of here and I'm not going to have to go through all that. And if you believe that, I hope you're absolutely right. I really, really do hope you're right. But that's not what I find in my Scriptures. I've not found that in the Scriptures that way. That's what He says. He said, you'll be here to the last trump. And He tells you when that's going to be. If you go study it, and I have studied it in detail, very much detail. And that's another thing that I've never had anybody to prove me wrong. Now, I've had some people give me some stuff from this one, that one, and the other one, but they didn't decisively prove anything with using the Scripture. I can make a pretty darn good case. If I was going to court on this, I could prove my case with the Scripture. Okay. So, what I believe that Christ was talking about in that first period of time is probably already happening. I noticed that it was exciting to me because I see a lot of bad stuff, but I have hope. And I want you to understand, you will leave with a message of hope here, not gloom and despair, folks. I want you to understand that because I don't believe in gloom and doom. I'm excited about what I see going on. Because I see some good things coming as well. Not just all bad. I see a lot of good things. But the bottom line is this. Christ told us what would happen in these periods of time. He's got 3, and He tells us what's going to happen during them. What is the first sign that He says will happen during the Great Tribulation? The elect will be delivered up to be killed. Well, who are the elect? We've got to define who the elect are. Are they God's leftovers? They're God's best. They're His absolute best. Well, if He says they're going to be delivered up to be killed, then what happened to the rapture? Well, you said they won't see any tribulation. And they won't see... And it frustrated me. Former pastor I used to have, I had to leave because you couldn't sit under it anymore. And her quote was, God's going to bless your socks off until He comes and gets you. That was her quote every Sunday. I guess that was in the book of Hezekiah along with some of that other stuff. That was the story. The book of Hezekiah is a private joke. I had an old pastor, minister in Church of God for about 40 years, a friend of mine. He called Brother Noble. Wonderful man. Loved him. He was like family to me. And I helped him for many years, worked under him for many years. And he was always having fun. He just loved. He was the kind of fellow that could skin you up one side down the other, and then go fishing with you the next day, and you wouldn't even think nothing about it. He just had a way of doing that. He knocked me in the head for saying things to you like he did, but he just had a way of doing it, and people loved him. But Papa Noble got up to preach one morning, and had a church full of people, and he told the people, he said, if you will, turn with me to Hezekiah, the 2nd chapter. And he just sat there and waited. And all these people picked up the Bible, and I said, I was about to bust a gut. I busted out laughing. But I contained myself. And so then after a couple of minutes, they were still looking through there. He looked up, he said, now I know who reads their Bible and who doesn't. But he was that kind of fellow. He could do that. Yes, ma'am. 5 minutes? Okay, good. But I believe that because Christ said that we were going to see this persecution, that we will. It's not what I said. Go read it for yourself. Go read that chapter thoroughly. Research it. Cross-reference it like I have. Out of the Old and New Testament as well. It's very clear what he says is going to happen. In the second period of time, we're going to see trouble. And if we think we're going to see trouble, then maybe we need to pay attention to that, and maybe we need to plan for some of the things that we could see. Now, in the 2nd chapter of Daniel, I want to share something with you that it talks about. And I'm not going to preach to y'all today. This is just an added bonus. The bottom line is that in the 2nd chapter of Daniel, he talks about the image. The head of gold, chest of silver, legs of brass, and there are 10 toes of iron mingled with clay. Well, the 10 toes of iron mingled with clay represent the New World Order. But iron and clay don't mix. The clay makes the iron weak. And I believe that we are the clay that's not going to mix with the New World Order. And I believe there are going to be pockets of people across this earth that are not going to go with the New World Order, and it's going to make it a weak kingdom. And it's going to make it a short-lived kingdom. And I believe that as a result, that it's not going to last very long. And I believe that that clay represents us who are not involved in their commercial system. Because the New World Order is about commerce, and if you don't need to be involved with commerce, then you don't have to be involved with the New World Order. The key to what we're trying to do across America is to establish cities of refuge where people can go and set up barter communities where they can barter for what they need during this period of time. And their needs will be met, and we need you to be part of that and work with us on that. We have several of these going on across the country, and if you're interested in being part of that, you can be. But we encourage you. You need some here in Texas. Man, you got some beautiful land out here. I've been looking at it. It makes me want to move to Texas. I noticed coming up here on 20, man, you got some beautiful places up here. You got some great farmland, great cattle ranching land and everything, and a lot of it too. Yeah? Okay. And we want you to be a part of that, and we'll talk more about that, but we're going to have to change our disc. And just give us a moment.